Me and Darryl, it's been a strange relationship to say the least. 84, 85, our relationship was great. 86, it kind of, we had our differences. And then I would say 2010 was probably when things really hit the wall and really got bad, when there was a lot of finger pointing, a lot of stuff he was saying to my family and to my ex-wife that wasn't true. So we didn't speak for a while. We had the opportunity to talk recently, and I'm in LA now playing against in this old timers game with the Dodgers met yesterday, and we talked. And honestly, I missed the friendship me and him had, but it was a big space here, and I think a lot of that came from letting other people dictate our relationship and saying stuff back to him that I said, and vice versa, instead of us talking about it. But we did get an opportunity to talk, and I think me and him, we'll be all right. But for the most part, it's been like a love-hate relationship. It's almost been like two brothers live in the same house, and you fight with your brothers for a while, then you make up, and then 6 months later you're fighting again, and it happens. But me and him will always be close. We'll always be supportive of each other and wish the best for each other, and we probably always have our difficulties as well.
Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
That was Doc Gooden in an interview that I did with him back in 2013 when it looked like Doc was changing his life for the better during his book tour. And now the relationship, which is a contentious one to say the least, between Doc Gooden and Darryl Strawberry is back to fighting, and I don't think they can rectify this situation, as Doc went to the Post yesterday following Darryl Strawberry begging Doc to get help after he missed the WFAN event, and Doc called Darryl Strawberry Lucifer. And now joining us on the hotline is Jim Baumbach from Newsday, who does a great job for Newsday, and actually last year did a story on Doc Gooden, and he joins us right now. Jim, Zach Gelb, thanks for a few minutes, and how are you?
Doing good. How about you, Zach?
Well, I'm doing great, and it is a somber day because, yes, these guys are known for what they did in 1986, but we're still talking about them in 2016. And I saw the picture yesterday of Doc Gooden, and I thought he was improving his life in 2013, and I've spent some time with him at some charity events. But after yesterday, and you see the statements that Doc released, I think Doc is back to some of his old habits, and it doesn't look good for the health of one Doc Gooden.
You know what? It's really so hard to say, but the bottom line is that Doc Gooden lost the benefit of the doubt a long time ago. We're talking, this has been an addiction that's been going on for 30 years, on and off, and given the different missteps he's had along the way, he'll be the first one to admit this. He's admitted this to me, that he doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. So while I have not heard one person, including Darryl Strawberry, who I spoke to yesterday, say specifically that I have seen him do cocaine or I know for a fact that this is back going on. I have firsthand information. No one has said that. People believe it, but there's that's a big leap to make. And we all see the pictures. We all see what's going on. Doc says he has an explanation for each part of it, but how much of that is the addict covering up for it, and how much of that is real? I mean, that's something that pretty much I think only Doc Gooden knows.
And I read that statement the other day, and it's only speculation from us, but I would have to imagine if he really didn't use cocaine for the last 4 years, I think he would include more than just one line in a multiple paragraph statement. But you're right, he has lost the benefit of the doubt, because even on this show, he was supposed to come on 2 weeks ago, and he's been someone that's come on in the past. I can't say enough good things about Doc, but I called him 2 hours before, and then when it came time for the interview, his phone went off, and it went off for a few days, and it only makes you wonder, too. He misses so many events, and you have to think, well, what's happening when he locks himself in his room? And with this pass, you could only speculate that he's back to his old ways.
Now, with the one thing I will say is that Doc Gooden is a people pleaser. He rarely says no, and the other thing is he's notoriously unreliable. And I say that with no ill will. I mean, he is notoriously unreliable. You almost need to go into anything you plan with Doc that it may not happen.
Oh, likely,
I agree. I'm sorry?
I agree. The day that we had him on the show, I didn't feel 110% okay with promoting it because I felt like he was going to blow us off,
Yeah. But how much is that because he's in his room doing drugs, and how much is that because he's, notoriously unreliable? I mean, we don't know. I mean, the fact he said he has not done drugs for 4 years, that to me, I mean, we're all looking for tea leaves here, and we don't know it. But I went to his house for a story last October. He was living on Long Island at the time. And he told me, went into great detail about the last time he'd done drugs. It was March 11, 2012, I believe was the exact date. He knew the date because he says he repeats it every single day. He said at that time it was he couldn't go more than an hour without doing drugs, let alone a day or week, month, or year. So he said that's why he needs to repeat the date. So the fact that in that statement he said 4 years, I said, okay, well, at least that goes in line with what he had told me last year. But again, I mean, there's a lot of other things at play here. And number one is that, someone like Darryl Strawberry is so publicly going against it and so publicly leading this fight. You do wonder what agenda Strawberry has. I mean, he says that he has no agenda. He just wants to help out Gooden. But clearly, as you're in that audio clip just now, clearly there are issues between the two of them that stem all the way back to the 80s.
So when you were out there doing the story, and that was during the World Series, it was like, for example, when I did a charity event last summer with Doc Gooden, I left that event thinking, okay, he's changed his life around. When you left that day, did you think he was moving in the right direction?
I mean, he definitely was frail looking. When you first see him, you were surprised by his how thin he was. I did talk to him about that, and he said that the reason why he was so thin was because he said there was a couple of years back, like in 2010-11, when he said he was really fat, and he said that there was a picture of him that from a Yankees Old Timers Day. If you Google Yankees Old Timers Day, Dwight Gooden, you'll see this photo of him with this belly. It looks like he's got a pillow in his belly. He's so big. And the New York Post, he said, ran a photo of it and poked fun at him and the way they do things. And he said that he was really embarrassed by that, and he kept that picture on his phone. He showed it to me on the spot and said that really led him to stop eating. And he said that he admitted he went overboard with not stop eating. He said that it became a mental thing. And I remember sitting in the room hearing this, superstar athlete, this guy who was one of the best pitchers of all time in his prime, talking about how he basically had an eating disorder, the way he said. I brought that to Strawberry yesterday because Strawberry is one of his main points for why he believes he has a drug problem. He says, look at how he looks right now. And so I mentioned the story that Gooden told me, and Strawberry said, I run a treatment center. Yeah, this is what addicts do. They lie. Maybe he even believes the lies. Who knows? I mean, there's two stories. Both of them are very believable. I think really only one person really knows the depth of what's going on, and that's Dwight Gooden.
Jim Baumbach joins us, but as we try to explore and figure out, is Doc in the right state of mind or is he not, I would also have to say that letter from Janice Roots is very telling as well, Jim.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I met her that day. She was in the house. Obviously, she was someone who was very close to Gooden for several years there. And Strawberry, to me, made the point yesterday that for everything that Gooden's saying, he's not dismissing what she's saying. And he said, he can take it against me, but where is he denying what Janice said? Now, that's a very fair point. It's a very valid point. There are things you need to consider. We don't know her backstory, and we also don't know what led to their breakup and what circumstances exist there. I mean, so there are question marks there. But yes, taken on the surface, that is a very damning letter.
When you talked to Darryl the other day, because let's assume, and I know it's a tough assumption that Doc is still using, and it's only speculation, but from the evidence we have, it doesn't look like things are in the right place for him. And there's been so many times where people will walk away and say, hey, Doc looks great, and now Doc doesn't look great. When you talked to Darryl yesterday, did he open up to you and explain how really as an addict each day is a struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I've had that conversation actually with Doc more than I've ever with Darryl.
Okay.
I mean, Darryl, Darryl's an interesting case in the sense that he doesn't really talk like a recovering addict. I mean, he does admit that he's a recovering addict. He used the phrase, I'm an addict in recovery. But he does not admit to having the urges anymore. Gooden will freely admit that. And that's why you walk away from every conversation with Doc saying, this guy's really real. He admits the struggle that he faces. Darryl basically says, I gave it up and I moved on. And he's so frank about it. He'll say, I gave up prostitutes. I gave up alcohol. I gave up drugs, and I never looked back. And you almost hear that and you say, how is that possible after all those years? But somehow Darryl's been able to do it. Doc's a completely different person. Doc will tell you to your face that he feels the urges, and he's had to dump numbers from his phone. He told me he's had to stop drinking alcohol because he felt like that was a trigger for him. He said he had to. He has a therapist that he goes to talk through, the Mets days, because he said that he really would get down into the dumps over his lost potential about what could have been, and being in the Hall of Fame and all that stuff. And he said that really was a trigger for him as well. So you hear Doc talk about it, and you say, wow, that's the struggle. You hear Darryl talk about it, and Darryl, somehow the light switch went off, and he just turned and turned the corner. And for both of their sakes, we can only hope that they're both right.
And their relationship has been a roller coaster. That's well documented, and we saw in the 30 for 30 when they were talking about some sensitive issues. But I just wonder, I just feel like that this is just Darryl Strawberry with everything that he has had go on in his life and now what he does in his rehab. I just think that this is his last stand for Doc Gooden, and this is him saying, hey, even though we've had the ups and downs, I still think of Doc as my friend, and we went through a lot of good times, and this is his last resort to go on out and really just make this all publicly to say something is wrong, whether it's drugs or not. We got to get Doc the help.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the case Darryl's making. That's what he says is his motivation. He says he doesn't care if Doc never talks to him. He feels like he's doing what he has to do to be able to sleep at night, to know that he did everything he could to help Doc turn his life around once again. Doc, on the other hand, believes that Darryl's doing this to put him down and make himself look better, because it's always Doc and Darryl. And Doc and Darryl admitted that to me yesterday. He said, let's stop making it Doc and Darryl. I'm in a different place in my life than he is. So you sense that there is a competition between the two of them that has existed for 30-some years. It's almost, we see this in sports stars. We see it, the Jeter-A-Rod relationship. These two guys that can connected and things happen. Obviously it's a completely different scenario. But, there is competition there, and these are pro athletes. These are guys who compete in the highest stage. So clearly, they need something to drive themselves. But Darryl says that he's driven to help Doc, and he wants to go to bed at night knowing he did everything he possibly can, which is why he went public.
It's really just remarkable how we're still talking about these guys, and they were known for what happened in 86, and it's 2016. I wasn't even alive in 1986. It's just unbelievable how we still talk about these guys still to this day, and there's such an attention from the public about these two.
Yeah, it really is remarkable, and it shows you, for someone like yourself who was not alive, it shows you just how big of stars they were in the 1980s. These guys, they didn't just rule baseball. This was essentially Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson being teammates. The Mets were the kings of New York and the kings of baseball. They had the personality. They had the dominance, they had the swagger, and here were their two young stars who they were all over billboards, and I think part of that was also competition among themselves, and I think they both competed because they both were top stars. But these guys were you can't understate how big they were, and in some ways they probably were too big, because that's probably led to some of their downfalls.
And you just have to sit there and wonder who's the one person that could step in and try to get Doc the right help. And I saw the 30 for 30, and one name that came to mind that gave him a second chance was George Steinbrenner. Clearly, George isn't alive anymore, but do you think the situation could have been maybe a little bit different if George still was alive, to maybe find a resolution to this and see what really is going on with Doc, especially with the great respect both of those two had for George?
Yeah, Doc definitely looks at George Steinbrenner as a father figure. I'm not sure how much of impact he would have had on his life, especially with even with George still being alive. We have to remember what his last couple of years were like, and he really wasn't involved, number one, for a couple of years, and I'm not sure how much of a relationship he had with Doc, just because he was in a tough state himself. I think, Gooden. The other thing we need to take into account here is Gooden lost his mother last month, and his mother was someone who was his rock. Getting to know Doc, you got to know him pretty quickly that he really cared for his mom. That he admits he lied to her many, many times, and that hurt him because of covering for his drug use and stuff like that. But he really, really cared and adored his mom, and I think losing her last month obviously was something tough. we're all playing armchair psychologist to figure this out here, though.
No, you're exactly right. And final one before we let Jim Baumbach run, and that's the unfortunate part of it, because you see the value that family had in his life with his close relationship with his dad and also his mother. And unfortunately, the mother just passed away recently, like you said. But down deep, I think Doc Gooden's a good person. I still do believe that he still needs help. And that's the unfortunate part of this, because I think he has an enormous heart. But sometimes, the power of addiction, it really gets the best out of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to watch, because there's no good way to look at the story, because obviously if he's using again, you want him to get the help. I mean, I firmly believe what you just said. He is a good person. And then there's the flip side, that what if this is at 1% or 5% or 10%, whatever the odds are, that he's not using, and something else is going on to make him look this way. If he's in a deep depression, whatever it could be, and here he is having to deal with his past, essentially, while dealing with something else. There's so many scenarios that we really just don't know, and that's what makes it so weird. And that's why some of Gooden's friends are mad at Strawberry for doing it this way. They said, yes, maybe it works by going public, but he should have gone private first, is what some of Gooden's friends say, and obviously Gooden feels that way.
Hey, Jim, I appreciate the time. Hopefully next time we have you on, we could talk about something a little bit more in a colorful light, because this is definitely an upsetting story, but I do appreciate you giving us the time and your insight today.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. There's Jim Baumbach joining us on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920, The Jersey from Newsday. And this is a sad story. And even if Doc isn't using, I don't blame Darryl Strawberry for taking this public, because I just really think Darryl's jumping up and down and he's begging for Doc to get help. Even if it isn't drugs, something's going wrong in Doc's life. And we could only sit here and speculate, and maybe that speculation isn't fair, and maybe that passing of his mother, he still has not been able to get over that, and I don't blame anyone for not being able to get over that. But too many times with Doc does he disappoint us, and too many times with Doc does he miss an event, or does he not look good when it comes to an appearance. And with that being said, you know what drugs can do with people. Darryl Strawberry clearly knows what drugs could do with people, and so does Doc Gooden. But when you see Darryl looks like he's healthy now. When you see Doc doesn't look like he's healthy. And I just hope before we wake up one day and read something that says Doc Gooden passed away, I hope we don't have another one of those tragic, somber stories, because we've seen that too many times in life, when we've seen all these signs of people having an addiction and people delaying getting help, and then you have that dark, gloomy day where both of these players were given a God-given talent. And yes, they had success, they won championships, but there could have been more. And no matter what else happens in life, even though Darryl Strawberry has turned his life around, when you think of Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden, the first word that comes to mind is disappointment. And then drugs. You don't immediately think of the success they had on the baseball field, because it could have been greater. And now they're both far removed from the game. They've been far removed from the game. And it appears on the surface, Darryl's okay. As far as Doc, with the letter that we saw from Janice Roots, his ex, and what we're hearing from Darryl Strawberry and the pictures that we see of Doc Gooden, it doesn't look good for Doc. And wherever Doc is right now, I hope that he gets that help, because he's a good man. He means well. He's been very kind to me, but he needs help, and I hope he gets that help. And sometimes when people have these enormous hearts, they lose sight of helping themselves because they try to help everyone else. And that's the situation that I think we have here. 609-919-9200, 609-919-9200. This is the Zach Gelb Show.